Hey everyone, so 2 days ago I uploaded my unpopular opinions book tag, so I figured why not keep my opinions going and make an even potentially more controversial video and rank the YA fantasy books that I have read. So YA fantasy is probably the genre that I've read the most from at this point in my life. So I feel like I have enough of a base to work from where I have a lot of different very popular series that I can compare and rank according to my own opinions. So this is by no means objective, obviously, because I'm not in the least bit qualified to do this. I'm just a reader who has opinions. So if you don't like them, sorry. Let's just get right into it. I am going to use the tier list. So S is going to be the top tier, like best of the best. And then D is the lowest. And that is like my least favorite series. So I'll start off with an easy one just to kind of show you the ropes and show you how this is going to work. Let us start with Harry Potter. Obviously this is S tier. It's excellent. It's the best. I think we can all agree, except maybe a couple of you out there, we can all agree for the most part that this is an S tier, along with Hunger Games, another very easy one. Let's just go ahead and put that in the S tier as well. So now let's get to a couple more difficult ones, if you will. So the first one I have is Red Queen. And when I'm talking about these YA fantasies, I'm going to try to limit my opinions to just the first book in the series because some of these I haven't completed the entire series for. Most of them I have, but some of them I haven't. So to make things fair across the board, I'm only referring to the first book in the series for all of these. So for Red Queen, the first book in the series I had read a long time ago. I remember liking it just fine, but it's very cliche. Like if you read it now, you'll notice a lot of the same tropes, a lot of the same plot devices, just a lot of the same everything is present in this book. It's not very unique. It doesn't bring a lot of new stuff to the genre. So I can't give it a very good rating for that reason. So for me, this is like very middle of the road. I don't really recommend this series moving forward to other people who haven't read it because it's not my favorite. There's so many better ones out there. So I'm gonna say that Red Queen is in the C tier. Whew. Okay, Six of Crows. Six of Crows is one that is very hyped. I personally love this story, but the problem with it is it's very character driven. So for readers who like more plot driven novels, this is probably not going to resonate as strongly with you, but for its character work, for its world building, I personally loved it. I actually am going to put this in the A tier because I think it is excellent. I think it does what it wants to do very well. And the characters are some of the best I've read in the young adult genre. So that is A. But moving to Shadow and Bone, again, I love the world building in this novel. I think it's excellent. I love the Grishaverse. I love the Russian-inspired fantasy world, and I actually really liked the characters in this novel. I especially like the villain work in this novel. I think it's really cool when a fantasy series makes a very memorable villain. So for the reason of the world building being excellent and the villain being excellent, I'm also going to put this in A tier, even though that might be an unpopular opinion at this point. I love the Grishaverse. That's just me. Let's go to Darkest Minds, which not a big fan. I talked about this in my unpopular opinions, so if you want to know how I feel about it, you can watch that video. I'm gonna put this in the D tier. Sorry, Darkest Minds fans. Let's go to City of Bones. Let's just make myself really unlikable here. City of Bones, I think I read it too late in life. I think if I had read it when I was younger, I would have enjoyed it much more, but reading it for the first time as a 25-year-old, it was not great. And the love, the romance in it is so taboo, so bizarre, so unnecessary. I'm gonna put this in the C tier. It's not the worst. It does have some redeeming qualities. I think the world of the Shadowhunters is very cool, but some of the things in this story are bizarre and it's a little too angsty for my taste. So, all right, let's go to Clockwork Angels. So another Cassandra Clare novel. I actually like this particular novel a lot more than City of Bones. I think its character work was much better. Its romances were much better. It just felt more mature. So I'm actually gonna give this one a B tier. I think it was definitely a step up from City of Bones. I don't think it's to the level of like an A or an S, but it's definitely good, and it does get better with the trilogies. So again, I'm just going off of the first book, and the first book for me is a B. Let's go with Truth Witch. So Truth Witch, to be honest with you, I have to go back and reread it because first time I read it, I just didn't connect to it at all. I don't remember hardly anything about it. So I'm judging based off of my very first time reading it, and this could change in the future, but for me, it was just very unmemorable. It didn't do anything wrong, and I actually appreciated that it was taking the female-female like friend relationship and really focusing on that versus like a romance relationship. So I really liked that aspect of the novel, but it just was so forgettable. It dragged a lot. I'm gonna put this in C, but again, if I reread this, maybe I would like it more, but for now it's a C. Let's go with Caraval. So Caraval is one that is also very hyped. I personally didn't love the writing style. I thought some of the metaphors that were used were a little strange, a little bit of a stretch. Some of them took me out of the story. And I didn't love any of the characters a lot per se. I thought the concept of it was very unique. I liked the carnival setting. I thought it had a pretty clever mystery and plot twist at the end, so I will give it credit for that. It's not going to be my favorite, but it's not terrible, so I'm going to put it kind of in the middle. I'm going to put it at a B tier. It's good and a lot of people love it, and it had a unique concept, so you got to give it credit for that. But characters, writing style wasn't crazy about. Going to Maze Runner. Maze Runner was super popular several years ago. I read this book several years ago as well and loved it. I loved the first book, especially in the Maze Runner series. It's just the best. I thought that this was excellent. I don't think it's to the point where it's like going to be my favorite ever, so I'm gonna put it in the A tier. It was really good. I loved being in the dark the whole time, just not knowing what was going on with our main character and trying to figure things out with him. It was so much fun. I had a blast reading this, so this is definitely A tier for me. Moving to Illuminati, which I think is such a strong series, and I actually I love this series so much, and Illuminati, the first book in the series, is my favorite. So since we're just talking about the first book in the series, I'm actually going to put this at an S tier. This is one of my favorite young adult fantasy, well, it's more of a sci-fi, but this is one of my favorite young adult SFF books of all time. It is so good. The format of it, if you don't know, it's told in like these confidential files where sometimes you're reading through like a chat room messages, you're reading sometimes from surveillance videos. It's a really cool, unique format that's fun to read either physically, and I've heard the audiobook is great. So I personally love this story. I love the characters. I love the AI. Oh my god, Aiden is just the best. So I really enjoyed it. Yes, I'm sticking with that S tier. Now moving to the Young Elites. I think this was so underhyped. I loved the Young Elites. I think at this point in time, it's probably a little cliched at this point. If you read it now, it probably does feel like a lot of other young adult fantasy books, but at the time that I read it, I loved it. I hadn't read a ton of young adult fantasy at that time, and it does take the typical like chosen one hero trope and kind of twist it on its head because our main character is actually more of an anti-hero, which I loved. I loved taking a very dark turn on our main character and exploring that. So I personally loved this particular book and the series overall, so I'm gonna put this at A tier. I do think it's underhyped. I am curious to go back and reread it and see if my opinion would change, but for now, it's an A. Okay, let's just get into Sarah J. Maas, shall we? So y'all were waiting for this one, right? So let's start with Throne of Glass, her first series. Just specifically talking about the first book in the series. Throne of Glass, I thought was fine. I liked it at the time I read it. It didn't do anything necessarily wrong per se. I wasn't crazy about like the romance aspect, but I liked Selena as a character. Plot I felt like was a little bit all over the place, but overall, like since this was Sarah J. Maas's first novel, I was impressed. I liked it. I liked it enough to continue on with the series. So I'm gonna be pretty neutral here and give this a B tier. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best. Let's talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses now. So I actually read this prior to A Court of Mist and Fury coming out, and I enjoyed it. I know I'm probably in the minority. I know it's very problematic. I know that a lot of other stuff happens in this series that changes a lot in the first book, but when I read the first book, I really liked it. Was it my favorite ever? No. I'm gonna also put this in the B tier, acknowledging that there is some things that are problematic that could have probably been reworked a little bit, but overall it was extremely entertaining, very fast-paced. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I would definitely call it more of a guilty pleasure. Let's talk about Shatter Me. I have a full rant review on this book that I'll link down below if you're interested in watching it. I personally didn't love this book, and again, first book in the series, so I'm just talking about that first one. I didn't like it. I thought the characters were pretty bland. I thought Juliet was very passive. I thought the plot was very slow moving, and I thought the writing style was very bizarre. Nothing worked for me in this novel, so this one is gonna be a D tier for me. Sorry if you're a fan. Cinder. So Cinder is interesting. It is the sci-fi twist on the classic Cinderella story, and because of that, because it's kind of a retelling, it's very, very predictable. So it doesn't really have any big twists or surprises in it, which makes it kind of a drag at certain points to get through. But the character work and the imagination that went into it, I really appreciated, and I liked the series overall. I know I'm just talking about the first book, but overall I think that this first book really laid a great foundation for the rest of the series and was very imaginative and is beloved by so many. So for this one, I'm gonna give it a B tier. Again, it doesn't do anything spectacular, but it also doesn't do anything wrong. So I liked it. Let's talk about The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, the first book in the Chaos Walking trilogy, which is one of my absolute favorites. I think this is extremely underrated. The writing style, the characters, the world building, the mystery, and the twists, just everything about this book I absolutely loved. There's not one bad thing I can say about it. This is an S tier for me, for sure. This will definitely go down as one of my favorite young adult fantasies of all time. So that's all I have to say about that one. The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. So this is the first book in the Remnant Chronicles series. This was fine. Golly, I feel like most of these are gonna be B tiers because they just, like, it didn't do anything wrong, but the characters weren't like spectacular. The plot wasn't spectacular. What this does have though is it has a really unique premise where our princess has run away from the kingdom because she doesn't want to be a princess and blah blah blah, she wants to be a normal girl, basically is being followed by the prince that she was supposed to be married to and an assassin who's trying to kill her, and we don't know which character is which, and it's told from alternating perspectives, and the whole book you're trying to figure out which one's the assassin and which one's the prince, and it has a great twist, and I loved that kind of plot device that was used. It made it very unique and stand out. So for that, I do have to give it some credit. But the rest of it kind of fell a little bit flat. So I'm gonna give it B. I'm gonna give it B. I feel good with that. Fallen Kingdoms. So I would say that this is like the young adult version of Game of Thrones, where you've got a bunch of different characters that we're following, but the characters are all teenagers and they're all like extremely angsty. It's like the angstiest ever. And so if you like angsty in your young adult, you'll love this series. I don't like angsty teen romance and dialogue, so I wasn't a fan. So this is going to be a C tier for me, because I just couldn't get past how cheesy it was. It was very cheesy. Divergent is another one by Veronica Roth. This one I thought when it came out, it was really, really great. To give it a pretty good rating, I'm gonna give it between A and B. So many of these series are B's, so let's go with A, because this one really does stand out as being like a classic, like young adult fantasy / dystopian that you gotta recommend to everyone to read, just to at least form your own opinion on, because it really did do a lot for the genre. The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater is one of my favorite young adult fantasies as well. It's more magic realism than it is fantasy, because it's very much in our world and there's just some magic sprinkled out. It's very paranormal, very character driven. So if you don't like the characters, you're not gonna like the series. I loved the characters, so it totally worked for me. This is an S tier for sure. Missborne by Brandon Sanderson. Another one that just is so underhyped, and I feel like it's actually now like getting the recognition it deserves, but for so long it was so underhyped, and it's just the best world, the best characters, the coolest magic system. I know some people think that this is adult versus young adult, and I think it could be either one. I really do. I've seen it shelved in both places in bookstores, and so I think that this leans a little bit younger on the adult category and a little bit more mature on the young adult category. So it's kind of one of those in-betweeners that's a great introduction to like adult fantasy if you've only ever read young adult. This is just a wonderful book all around. It's an S tier for sure. Scythe is another S tier. I think this one has also just been so hyped up recently, and it totally deserves the hype. I'm not gonna go into what it's about because I've talked about it on so many videos, but it is great. It's so worth all of that hype. If you haven't checked it out, please, please do. Definitely S tier. Miss Peregrines Home for Peculiar Children. I was not a fan. So this one is more of it's read a lot younger. So it is young adult fantasy, and it's about a boy who is trying to kind of discover secrets from his grandfather's past and stumbles upon this kind of time loop. Well, I don't know how to explain it. Time loop where this home for peculiar children run by a woman named Miss Peregrine, and everyone who lives there kind of has this power or ability, and for me the characters were very unlikable. Like the main character was very unlikable, and all of the side characters I just didn't like at all. And then the pictures, so in this novel they're accompanied by like real photographs that Ransom Riggs found and tried incorporating into his novel, and for me they felt a little gimmicky, like he was stretching his story at some points to accommodate the pictures rather than having the pictures kind of flow seamlessly into the narrative. It felt like you were kind of trying your best to work in a way that you could use the picture. It was very weird. It like took me out of the story a couple times. So I wasn't a huge fan of this one. I'm gonna give it a C tier because it's not the worst by any means. A lot of people love this series, but for me, just like characters didn't work, and even though the plot was interesting, just sometimes it just didn't work at all, and there were a lot of times where I was dragged out of the story because of the pictures. I think I'm gonna leave it there. I talked about most of the series. If there's a series I didn't talk about that you're curious what I would rate it, you can comment it down below and I'll let you know my rating. But this is already long enough, so I'm just gonna stop it here. What do you think of the series that I talked about? Would you disagree, agree with my rankings? I would love to hear your comments down below on some of these series that you've read and where you would put them on this tier list. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time.